Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. It is the recap episode. We are here on week 10, recapping week 10. We're actually in week 11 now, but we're recapping week 10 and all the craziness that happened with Big Ten football. I'm here with my guy, Zack Guggenheim from Big Ten Football Talk to break it all down. Zack, how are you doing tonight? And did you have a record-setting attendance at church today, like there was with record-setting attendance at Happy Valley?
I don't know if we had record-setting attendance at church, but my house felt as raucous as Beaver Stadium because I hosted an 11-year-old's birthday party.
Wow.
And it's like, I think I was more stressed than Will Howard was.
Oh wow, that's pretty stressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But were
I
you
and
as tough and did you come back from adversity as much as Will Howard did?
I don't know, man. I'm wearing pajama pants and drinking tea right now. So that's I'm just not sure. Ask me in the morning. I need to take a cold bath or something, like an ice bath or something to heal up, man.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Will Howard definitely didn't put his pajama pants on. He put on his big boy pants and had a game against Penn State to help get the win there. And a lot of other guys they put on their big boy pants as well. Curtis Rourke came back. He put on his pants and had a game. Ethan Garbers had a game.
Yeah,
Hudson
he did.
Card tried to put on his pants and have a game, but Ryan Walters in the fourth quarter or in the overtime on fourth down. We'll talk about his
E.
decision making there, I'm
E.
sure, but yeah, a lot to talk about with the Big Ten this weekend. I think we just better get started off with a game that we thought would be really interesting. I thought it was one of the best games of the weekend, but it turns out Iowa with Brendan Sullivan now is just unstoppable because they beat Wisconsin 42-10. Holy crap. Caleb Johnson absolutely dominates 135 yards and 3 touchdowns. Iowa's ground game was just unstoppable. Sullivan had a very solid start. He, in the first start, as the Iowa's quarterback, threw for 93 yards, rushed for 58, and contributed 2 touchdowns. Now, you might be thinking, oh, less than 100 yards passing. Listen, this is what they want from him. When Caleb Johnson is going off the way he is, you just need
Mhm.
you just need Brendan Sullivan make the plays he's supposed to make, give you a little bit extra in those moments that you need him, and that's what he was. He was obviously more dynamic than Cade McNamara. He's obviously a better playmaker than him, and at the end of the day, the Badgers are going home and their tails tucked between their legs because this was not the effort that Luke Fickell wanted from his team, Zach.
No, and I mean we talked a bit about this, I think either on show yesterday or off air. Iowa, if they play Brendan Sullivan to start the season, is a playoff team.
Yeah.
Like they are legit good. And listen, Wisconsin,
They
I
don't lose to
think,
Iowa State, that's for sure.
yeah, they don't lose to Iowa State. I would argue they probably don't get themselves into a hole against Michigan State.
Yeah, because the only defense Michigan State had was pack the box on Caleb Johnson.
Yeah. Like, and Brendan Sullivan has been playing lights out. They probably put up a better showing against Ohio State too, if they have to account for his legs and his arm. Um, Listen, Wisconsin, we overrated Wisconsin because they had 3 wins over uh terrible teams and teams that were kind of in the gutter. Um, but this Iowa team is for real. I don't see them dropping another game, especially the way, like, you look at who they have on the rest, like the rest of the slate. Um, it's UCLA, who UCLA actually might give them problems at UCLA, but then Maryland and Nebraska. Like, I think they win those games. UCLA honestly might be their toughest game.
Yeah, the way it looks right now, that would make it look so. I mean, Ethan Garbers is playing much better lately. They still don't have a running game. I still don't know how UCLA does so well in the passing game with absolutely zero running game, but that's the world we live in with UCLA right now.
It'll be interesting to see how the Iowa's corners hand up against. I think maybe a receiver core that we underrated. because they like Garbers has been playing well. The receivers are athletic. But this is we're talking about. We'll talk about UCLA in a minute. I think the thing that impresses me about Iowa is just that they've. I feel like they have grown and they finally have the right personnel. And I think in a sense they kind of exposed Wisconsin. Braden Locke is. I thought he had gotten things together, but man,
Without a
between
running game, he's not.
yeah,
He has to have a running game. He is not a quarterback that you're going to be able to rely on to go out there and win you the game if nothing else in your offense is going right. Which there's a lot of quarterbacks that are like that. I'm not knocking the guy. But there's also a lot of quarterbacks out there that if there's no running game, he's not a difference maker. That's why you had to have Tyler Van Dyke this season to win some of these games. Is you needed a difference maker, and it's similar to Cade McNamara with Brendan Sullivan at Iowa. Is like if the running game isn't there, you have no option because Cade McNamara is your quarterback. Guess what? If the running game isn't there, you have a dynamic playmaker in Brendan Sullivan. We have Matt here saying his by far and away my favorite college football podcast this season. Thanks, Matt. We appreciate that. We appreciate you being here. We also have John saying, why did Brendan Sullivan transfer from Northwestern to Iowa? My understanding was he felt like there was a better opportunity to play at a national level with Iowa, and that he knew Tim Lester and he felt like he had a good shot at winning the starting quarterback job. Is that what you gathered as well, Zach?
Yeah, and I mean I think Northwestern had a good season last year.
That was their ceiling. I mean, they were never going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, in the new world, unless if they get that NIL rolling, which I don't think Northwestern that's what their goal is right now. I think Iowa is going to be a program that can sneak into the playoff at least maybe once every 5 to 8 years. That's not Northwestern. So
yeah, exactly. So, all right, Zach, let's move on. Not much more to talk about in that game. Let's move on to Oregon and Michigan. Oregon beats Michigan 38-17. This game was a little bit closer at points. It was 7-7 there in the first quarter. Tez Johnson does unfortunately go out. Looks like he is most likely done for the season based off his Instagram story and what we saw there. But at the end of the day, Dylan Gabriel with 294 yards passing. That was a fantastic performance. Looks like the Heisman front runner at this point, or one of them. After this performance, Michigan's failed trick plays. I mean, and there was really no other option Michigan had to, move the ball other than trick plays and stuff. Real fast, John is asking, where's the team graphics? I didn't have time to make them today, so I apologize. No team graphics today. I just didn't have time for them. So next time they'll be there. But yeah, Zach, your thoughts on Oregon, Michigan?
So I know the yardage doesn't make it look like it, but I went back and watched at least the extended highlights, which, you can't get everything from highlights. But just going back and watching those, I just came away thinking Michigan wasn't as bad as I thought they were. Like, I checked in on the game and I saw the game, but like watching it back, I was like, Michigan might be better than we think, because if they don't pull the stupidity at the 4th and 5, we're talking about possibly a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. And instead it's, at 38-17, it looks worse. I do think Oregon kind of pumped the brakes a little bit, but Michigan challenged them. And I think that maybe is my main takeaway. I still think Oregon's the best team in the country.
Yeah.
But I think Michigan, I know you and I might disagree on this. My main takeaway is I think Indiana's in for a dogfight next week.
I don't. I think they're going to kill Michigan.
Yeah, I know. I know you think that.
We'll get to that when we preview next week. But
Yeah.
I mean, Michigan has some good players. They had some players that can do some things, but I mean, this coaching staff, they just have no idea what they're doing. Like, and I'm
That's
sorry,
true.
I try not to super dog Michigan because like I realize I'm an Ohio State fan and me coming on here and dogging them is just like, my bias in a lot of ways, but I think it's absolutely justified because I heard multiple other Michigan podcasts talking about it. Like, what in the world is this coaching staff doing?
Yeah.
Why in the world are you calling a challenge on a clear drop? The guy went to the ground and dropped the ball. Colson Loveland clearly dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And after the game, Sharon Moore's like, "Oh yeah, we got a guy upstairs that tells me when we should and shouldn't challenge stuff." And it's like, dude, you shouldn't have needed the challenge. Like, you saw the ball go flying up into the air after he hit the ground. Like, anybody that knows the rule books would be able to say like, "Oh yeah, he didn't control it to the ground." That's number one. Number two, you run like a wide receiver pass to your backup quarterback on 4th and 5, and that's your 4th and 5 conversion play.
Yeah.
Like, you don't feel any confidence in your starting quarterback to be able to throw an out route. You don't have any confidence in your wide receiver to run a route essentially to get open. Like, I it's just baffling at this point. Michigan doesn't have terrible players. I mean, their wide receiver
Yeah.
core is not good. Davis Warren is a quarterback. Like, he is not like Alex Orji where he can't throw the ball. Davis Warren can throw the ball, and he's done a pretty good job these past 2 weeks. It's just the play calling and this coaching
Yeah.
staff that I have no idea how a Michigan fan can be happy with any of this Michigan staff. I guess you get Bryce Underwood and you're happy, but other than that, I think Bryce Underwood watched that game yesterday and he was like, "Do I really want to play for these coaches?"
Yeah. Well, and I think to that point, when I say I think that Indiana could be in a dogfight next week, it is because of the players. And I'll say this, Michigan's still fighting. Like, they're still fighting, they're still playing hard. And that's one aspect of the coaching staff that I will give credit to, is that they have their guys fired up. But everything else about the coaching is awful. Right? Like, motivation only matters so much. You actually have to execute. You actually have to know the rules, as Gary Danielson would say.
Yep.
You know it's bad when Gary Danielson chastises you on national television. They don't know the rules. Like, that's bad. But I do think there is. It's hard to say that there's hope because they're 5-4 and they have 2 really hard games ahead of them with Indiana and Ohio State. And a game against Northwestern that, if they play a C+ game, that gets dicey. Like, it's very possible. I know I just said I was more impressed with Michigan than I thought I'd be. And now I'm going to say that they might miss a bowl game. But the problem really is the coaching. Like,
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue. They have the players. Like, I'll
They
say
have 3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
They have 3 first-round picks on this team, possibly 4.
They have the players to make every team on the rest of their schedule uncomfortable at the very least. But the coaching really holds it back.
And the coaches will call plays and then they'll feel fine. So
yeah,
a few comments. John is here. He says, "How you doing, JR and Zach?" Doing good, John. Appreciate you being here. Dave, why did you not read my comment? Dave, unfortunately, I don't see your comment in here. So I don't know if maybe I missed it or something. If I did, please put it in there again. I don't have the starred comments for some reason today, so I don't know what's going on there. But put it in the chat again. I'm sorry, Dave. We'll address it. John says, "You see Alex Orji hit his head on the sideline crane. Do you see that, Zach?"
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I mean, that it's like the epitome of Michigan season. It's like, it's, and I don't want to laugh. Apparently he got concussed on the play, but
yeah, that's what John said.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the Charlie Brown, like Lucy holding the football and going yoink. Yeah, it kind of feels like that.
Yep. John is in favor. Oh, I don't know if he's in favor of it, but he says Michigan should hire Urban Meyer. I don't think Urban will go there, but I heard of Michigan fans that say they should hire Lincoln Riley.
Oh gosh, no!
I was like,
you want to talk? Lincoln Riley is a dumpster fire right now.
If you guys hate Ryan Day, don't do it.
Okay, can I really quick? I love Urban. He's washed, man.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he was starting to struggle at the tail end of his tenure at Ohio State. He was awful at Jacksonville. Like,
Hmm.
he doesn't have the bandwidth anymore.
Well, and he wouldn't have the control. That's the biggest thing in today's day and age, and it's why you saw Nick Saban, I think, retire, is that these guys
Yeah.
are realizing they don't have the control over these players that they once did before, right? They
Mhm.
don't have the ability to tell these players like, "Hey, you have to go do this," because at the end of the day, a lot of these players are making so much money. It's like, yeah, dude, you're not gonna tell me what to do. Like,
Yep.
I'll sit out and then I'll go transfer somewhere else next year or whatever. Like, it's not the same game that Urban had. He got out of college at just the right time.
Yeah. Agreed.
John says, what worries me about Michigan game is, as an IU fan, is the defense is still legit. I worry if Will Johnson plays. To be honest, John, if Will Johnson does play, I like the matchup for Curtis Rourke. He throws the ball over the middle so much, and he recognizes when Will Johnson has inside leverage. I don't think Will Johnson's going to get a pick six on Curtis Rourke. And Will Johnson doesn't cover over the middle as well as some other corners too. I still think he's a first round pick. I'm not knocking the guy. It's just that's one area of his game that is not as good as some other corners. So
Yeah.
I think even if Will Johnson plays, I think you're fine.
And you still have the other corner to pick on too.
Yeah. Which Jair Hill was out this game, so
Yeah.
which actually that was kind of better for Michigan. I felt like Amir Hall did a really good job. Like
Yeah.
so. Road Dust says, or go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, what's the impact of Tez Johnson's injury on Oregon?
Um, I do think that they lose a deep threat, obviously. But I think one of the biggest things, I mean, he has like 60 some catches on the season, so if he is truly out for the entire season, Dylan Gabriel does lose one of his preferred targets on third down and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think this Oregon team is good enough that Dylan Gabriel can find somebody else to throw to, and I think they have enough depth at wide receiver. There shouldn't be a huge drop off, but there's definitely going to be an adjustment period of Dylan Gabriel finding his third down guy and having a better deep threat than. I mean, there's not going to be a better deep threat than Tez Johnson, but finding another deep threat on this team. Of course, Evan Stewart can do it, but
Yeah.
Road Dust says Minnesota's rolling. They win upset Penn State. IU will have 400 yards offense versus Michigan and win by 38. There we go. There's the confidence. I love it. I love it. All right. Let's talk. Oh, there's Dave's comment. Dave says, I guess congratulations to Iowa. F the bad shows. Too bad the giant medium did not come through.
I think he means meteor.
Oh, meteor. Okay. I was like, medium. I don't get that. Okay, meteor. Yeah. All right. There you go, Dave. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those ones where you don't really know as a Minnesota fan. Like, you just want both teams to lose.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're glad one of them lost, and especially a hated rival in Wisconsin. So
That's how I felt when Michigan played Alabama. It's like, who do you want to win? I want the meteor to win. That's who I
Yeah.
want to win.
that's hilarious, Dave. I'm glad you reposted that one. I didn't see that one. We have over on the Voice of College Football Big Ten channel, William McBride is over there. Unfortunately, William, I can't bring your chat up on that one, but I do see it on my phone here. He says, who do you both see in the Big Ten championship right now outside of Oregon? I think it comes down to Ohio State and Indiana, right, Zach? I mean, whoever wins that game is going.
Yeah, I mean, I think Penn State is probably out. I mean, they would need a lot to happen for them to get back into that picture. And yeah, so it's really down to Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State. And I would slightly lean Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean Ohio State at home, that's one of the big things. But I mean Indiana's rolling this season. It's hard to find weaknesses, So for me,
go ahead.
I
was just gonna say, sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say it. By slightly lean, I mean like 52% to 48%. Like that's where I'm at with, because I think Indiana is legit. Like that's not me saying, well, Ohio State's gonna win by 100. Like I think that's gonna be an insane game, and I'm so happy for the Hoosiers.
it's gonna be Ohio State's second biggest test on offense, if not or on defense, if not their biggest test on defense this season. I say second hardest just because it's not at IU. You know, Oregon was at Oregon and everything that went on there, but still, Indiana has a super potent offense right now, so it's gonna be a huge test.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about Northwestern and Purdue, Zach. This is the one that everybody wants to hear about, right? This is the one that everybody wants to know what happened. Well, what happened is that Purdue looked dead in the water and they looked awful and things did not go well, and then they started coming back in the game. I have no idea why Northwestern was letting them come back in the game, but Northwestern was making mistakes. Purdue was capitalizing on them. The game goes into overtime, and Ryan Walters opts to go for it on 4th and 6 in overtime instead of kicking the field goal. Zach, why?
Because he knows he's going to get fired.
Eh,
I mean, I can understand. I mean, Northwestern scored a touchdown anyway, so the field goal wouldn't have mattered. But I just, man, you want to talk about bad coaching?
Yeah.
Everything about Purdue, give credit to Purdue coming back from two touchdowns down, and fighting back. That's a
they
big deal.
fought hard. I mean,
it's a big deal for a 1-1 at the time 1-6 team. But man, yeah, I just don't know. I don't understand what Purdue is waiting for. I get maybe wait till the end of the season to let Ryan Walters finish this out. But the reality is this team has not really improved. There's just not much to say. And I don't think Northwestern was great in this game either. It's not like
Northwestern played one of their worst games of the season.
Yeah. So I think, and in fact, one thing I mentioned Westlock Pirates on here a lot because I think they're more clued into Northwestern than almost anybody. And they were saying there's something going on between Braun and Lujan, the head coach and the offensive coordinator, because they were not happy with what was going on play calling wise. And I mean, and they said after this game, they're not winning another game in the Big Ten, which I thought was significant because I think they're pretty positive about their team. And the reality is they were down on their team after winning this game, which I think then thinking about Purdue, it's just, and I feel bad for the fans, man. This was a home game for Purdue. And it's just man, disappointment.
It was a sellout.
Disappointment.
It was a sellout too. The Purdue fans showed up.
How is it that Purdue fans are getting their fans how is it that they're filling their stadium more than Indiana?
Didn't Indiana have a sellout? I guess.
Well, that's fair. I think Indiana's getting there, but I'm just saying, man, the devotion of Purdue fans is admirable for how bad their team is.
Yeah, I my only thought is it's not basketball season yet. Just wait till basketball season gets here, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, I give a lot of credit to the fans. You know, that's what you want to see. But you know, it is what it is. What it is. So, yeah, I tend to agree. I can't see another win on the schedule here for Northwestern. They play Ohio State, Michigan, and Illinois. I guess things could get tricky in that Illinois game. It is at home for Northwestern rivalry game, but yeah, I don't see another win here. Maybe Michigan, but it's also at Michigan. I don't see a win there.
Yeah. And the Northwestern Illinois game is at Wrigley, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I think that kills the home field advantage.
Yeah, I mean,
for Northwestern.
Yeah, you're right. So, not looking good for Northwestern the rest of the season. We'll see if David Braun can make some coaching staff changes if he needs to, and things can get better for next year. But, yeah, at least they weren't 1-11, only winning one game outside of America. So,
yeah, gosh, just going back, John Jacobs fact checked me on the IU sellouts. I think I was thinking about the beginning of the season where
Signetti was complaining a lot at the beginning.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point. Is Purdue has not had to they did not need to control their fans. And that's after a 66-7 blowout to Notre Dame. I applaud Indiana for packing the stands now. It's just, how is it that the Purdue faithful are so loyal and they can't tie their shoes? Like, that's how bad this has been.
Maybe it was bobblehead night or something. Get a free bobblehead.
It better be. Like, they should pay the fans to be there at this point.
We're sorry
Like,
you have to watch this. Here you go.
like what? Like, if I had to pay $1 to watch that game, like, I'd be like, I want my money back.
Yeah. I was watching this game before the Ohio State Penn State game came on the TV with the sound on and everything, and my wife was sitting there and she was watching, and my wife's an IU fan, and she doesn't watch football at all. She has no idea what's going on a football field, and she just turns to me and she was like, "I don't know very much about football, but Purdue looks really bad." I was like, yeah, you don't have to know very much about football to know that. Not good. Not good for Purdue. And Philip does confirm Illinois at Northwestern is at Wrigley. So, yeah. Let's see. Okay. Commercial really fast, and then we will come back and we'll talk through the Nebraska UCLA game. UCLA gets the upset on Nebraska. We'll talk about that next. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zack Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zack's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle. Can't wait to watch the Ohio State Penn State all 22 film there on that one. That one's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, we got a good amount of people in here. Please do like and subscribe. We definitely appreciate it. Helps us out, helps other people see the videos and the live streams and all that stuff more. So not just this one, but also other videos and stuff. If you watch those, please do like and subscribe. All right, let's talk about Nebraska and UCLA, Zach. Nebraska did not have a good game at all. They did make a bit of a comeback. However, Dylan Raiola gets hurt, and I don't know. I mean, Dylan Raiola had a pretty terrible game, so not gonna say anything good about a player getting hurt, but maybe at some point it was better for them to maybe try to run it with Harburg and stuff. But at the end of the day, it was just not Nebraska's day, and Nebraska is having such a hard time to get to that bowl mark. I mean, they were 5-2, 5-3, 5-4. Like, they are trying so hard to get to that bowl mark. And it's going to be difficult to get there because they just keep dropping games. And this is the game that should have got them there to it, but they lose to UCLA at home. UCLA shows that a lot of what we've been seeing from them has not been fool's gold. They do have a good team, but they still do not have a running game. But Ethan Garbers put the team on his back. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I want to just give props to is Deshaun Foster getting his guys ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
Going to Nebraska, getting a win. Like, listen, UCLA, we knew they were going to have a terrible season. According to Sagarin, they have the number 1 hardest schedule in the country.
Yeah.
And I think at best, I think we set the over under on win total was 2. Like, it was, I think I had them at 2-10. I think when we did it together, I think we said maybe 1-11. I mean, it was not good. So I know it's ridiculous to say this, but for UCLA to get 3 wins this season with this schedule is actually pretty significant. And I think while I think we've been critical of Foster, like, he's done enough to get this team to progress with Ethan Garbers at quarterback, with their wide receivers. that they've been able to get a couple of wins that we didn't expect. So I think there's some props for UCLA. Bottom line is this though. This is a failure for Nebraska. This is a failure for Matt Rule. It's a failure for Marcus Satterfield, an offensive coordinator. And the fact that they dropped the last 3 games after going 5-1 is it's abysmal. I get that it was Indiana, who's much better than we expected, and Ohio State, who they probably should have beat, but you can't drop this game. And they did. And it's inexcusable for Nebraska, for a team that wants to kind of lift this curse. And for everyone saying Matt Rule is going to be, kind of build the foundation. You had a lot of goodwill from the fan base until this happened. This should not have happened. And I think this is going to turn the fan base. If the fan base wasn't already turned against Matt Rule, this will turn them if it hasn't already.
Yeah, I mean, starting with UCLA, you're right. This was a big win for them. They now have road wins as their 2 Big Ten wins on the road against Rutgers, and this was just last week, so Rutgers is a shell of what they were at the beginning of the season, but still a road win against Rutgers, and then you have this road win against Nebraska. Now it's impressive that UCLA has been able to go on the road and win these games, but at the end of the day, I'm with you, man. For as much goodwill as you were feeling about Nebraska last week after Ohio State. You saw the Indiana game and you hated that you got blown out like that, but it was also they just kept fighting and fighting, and they, were trying to get the win even though they were down by so much, and they just kept digging the hole more. You could almost excuse that away, right? People who watched the game and people who saw what happened, you could almost excuse that away and say, it is what it is. Just move on from it. Don't let it impact the season. Then you have a close game against Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't play well, and you go crazy, almost upsetting them. I mean, you're ahead in the 4th quarter. And then you come out in this game against UCLA, and UCLA just dominates. I mean, Nebraska tries to come back with a little bit of a run there at the end, but it's not enough. I saw a Nebraska fan put together a spreadsheet of every single final drive against these teams where they lose by 1 score, and it's just what in the world? There are just so many drives that are unsuccessful at the end of the game, and it's not just Matt Rule. It's Scott Frost, and it is all different kinds of coaches. I mean, coordinators, everything. It's not just one head coach. There's so many different coaches and coordinators, everything that's going on, and they cannot get it figured out. And I don't believe in curses. Nebraska might get me to believe in curses, because whatever they did, whatever voodoo magic they did in the 90s to be so good, it is worn off here since then, because everything just seems to go against the Cornhuskers, and they can never catch a break.
Yeah. It's almost like as soon as Tom Osborne left, it was, I don't know what happened, but it was bad.
Yeah.
They got the 3 national championships, and Tom Osborne's like, I sold my soul. And that, I don't actually mean that, but it is weird. They just have, and I mean, they haven't been the same since Bo Pelini got fired. And Bo Pelini wasn't a great coach, and I don't think he would do as well now as he did, because the Big Ten was weaker back then. Yeah. But I just, man, I feel awful for Nebraska fans, but I also am I really expected Matt Rule to have at least some sort of improvement. And I don't know, at USC is winnable. Nebraska is winnable. At Iowa, I don't think is winnable anymore. But I don't know who I trust less. USC, Wisconsin, or Nebraska, because all 3 of those teams are kind of spiraling right now.
I mean, I trust Wisconsin more. I mean, I know they had that bad game against Iowa, but I still think they can win with defense, especially if, especially with what Satterfield is putting out there right now. Satterfield has to go. I mean, there's no if and buts about it. Marcus
He's
Satterfield is
awful.
not an offensive coordinator at the Big Ten level. He needs to go learn someplace else. I don't think he was ever an offensive coordinator before he got to Nebraska. Check me on that if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't think he ever was, and he never should have been.
Yeah. Send
I
him to
mean,
a Nebraska JV program, JV
yeah,
high school.
yeah. We're gonna see this season the teams that lose by just a play or just a score here and there because UCLA or USC. We'll talk about them here in just a second. They've been losing so many games right at the end, and Lincoln Riley's been talking about it. And then you have Nebraska; they've been losing games right at the end. So you thought you had the battle of James Franklin and Ryan Day last week with losing the big games. You got the battle of two coaches this season that can't win at the end of the game in one score games. And it's crazy to think about. I think Nebraska's best chance there is at USC. I don't think it's at home against Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's defense is going to be too good for them, and they're going to be able to run the ball enough to have it open for Braden Locke. But yeah, I mean, this was the game you had to have as a Nebraska fan to for sure go bowling.
Yep.
And this Nebraska team could end up 5-7. It's possible.
Yeah, which is just unreal.
Yeah,
because they have the talent. Like they have.
No, yeah, they do.
Yeah, and I get Rail as a freshman. Like he did not have a good game, but
he's gotten worse throughout the year. Like
yeah,
that's the most concerning thing to me with Satterfield is like Satterfield has made him a worse quarterback as the year is going on.
Yeah.
Now you can argue maybe he was banged up here and there, maybe he had some injuries, stuff like that, but the decision making isn't there. Somebody put in the chat, I don't think the offense fits with him very well. Like it just it's crazy. So Dave seems to think Wisconsin is not going to a bowl game. Did we review their schedule? They're 5-4. Oregon, Nebraska, Minnesota.
It's possible. It's very possible they don't go to a bowl game.
This is after a game where they're battling for a bowl game right there as Nebraska, Wisconsin.
This is after I posted a video saying, "Is Wisconsin a dark horse playoff contender?" No, they're not. That was a terrible take by me.
I mean, if they had beaten Penn State, but
yeah, they didn't though.
Yeah, they did not. All right, let's talk USC Washington now, Zach. USC just comes up too little against Washington, too little, too late. They try to make the comeback, and it doesn't happen. Jonah Coleman was really good in this game, rushed for 104 yards and scored 2 touchdowns, playing a pivotal role on offense. Miller Moss, threw for a lot of yards, but he had two touchdowns to 3 interceptions on the day. They try to rally. They overcame a 20-7 halftime deficit. You and I were talking at halftime about possibly going live for the power rankings, in the fourth quarter of the USC Washington game, thinking maybe this could happen. Maybe we wouldn't have to go to bed so late, but no, that was not the case. USC came back, but it was not enough as they were not able to score on the final drive of the game. And Lincoln Riley goes to the press conference and continues to say what he said this entire time is that these games come down to one play and they just can't get it right. Whether it's Penn State, whether it's this game, tons of games this season, Michigan, whatever you want to call it, comes down to one play. And it's one mistake or one failure of execution, and UCLA doesn't get the win, or USC doesn't get the win.
I think I hate this. I called BS on Lincoln Riley that it comes down to one play. It's his whole approach. Like Miller Moss is a decent quarterback. Why is he throwing the ball 50 times?
Especially when Woody Marks is running the ball well.
Like by the way, you want to talk about a battle of coaches in over their heads? It's Jed Fish and Lincoln Riley. Because neither, I think this is how I finally put my finger on both of these teams, is that I like the idea of them more than I actually like them. So Washington has really good playmakers, really good quarterback, really good statistics defensively. But like at the end of the day, I'm like, man, you haven't proven much. And like even against USC, where they had a 2-score lead, they gave it up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like they just went dormant in the third quarter. And I'm like, man, put your foot on their neck. What are you
Yeah.
doing? And then USC, this whole thing about, well, if it comes down to one play, dude, your quarterback threw 3 picks. Like, just shut up. It's not coming down to one play. Your team's undisciplined. Your play calling stinks. Like, Lincoln Riley is lucky that the buyout is as big as it is. Otherwise, he would have been fired yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, USC's defense holds Washington to 6 points there in the second half. A Lincoln Riley offense should be enough to overcome the deficit. They should have been able to pull a Penn State with the great offensive mind that Lincoln Riley is. And this team is not short of playmakers and skill players. And I actually felt like the offensive line played pretty well against Washington. They got good pass rush on that final play, but there were multiple plays where it just felt like Miller Moss had all day to throw back there. Washington was rushing 3 or 4, and they weren't able to get anywhere near Miller Moss. And I mean, it was kind of astounding that they weren't really able to do much to him. Woody Marks, like I said, 22 carries, 123 yards, 1 touchdown. His long was only 19, so it's not like he had an 80-yard run where it was all in one run or something like that. Like, I don't have an answer for USC other than you got to stop blaming it on one play, one thing at the end of the game, and just tell your guys execute the entire game, and it won't come down to one play. It won't come down to this, thing there, because at the end of the day, both teams had 7 penalties. The difference was USC had 3 turnovers.
Yeah. Something that's interesting, and I it was a stat that I saw on Twitter, and I'm looking at it now. In the losses, in USC's losses, this is kind of estimated yards per attempt that he's thrown. So against Washington, he threw 50 times, less than 6 yards attempt. Against Maryland, he threw the ball 50 times, about 6.7 yards per attempt. Against Penn State is about 6.6. He threw the ball 34 times. Against Minnesota is less than 6 yards attempt. It was probably like 5.5. And then against Michigan, it was less than 6. And he threw the ball 51 times. And in those games, he has thrown, 8 picks in 5 losses. He has not thrown less than 34 attempts in a loss. Where if you look at his wins, 36 attempts against LSU, 30 against Utah State, which Utah State, 45 against Wisconsin, and then against Rutgers, 28. It's like, man, maybe balance your offense a little bit.
Well, and he doesn't provide you any running threat too, right? I mean, Miller Moss, we can talk about how he's throwing the ball so many times and, he's going to turn the ball over and stuff like that. The fact of the matter is Miller Moss is not Baker Mayfield. He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Caleb Williams. He doesn't have a running threat to him at all. He, can maybe maneuver the pocket around and stuff like that a little bit, but if Lincoln Riley doesn't have a Heisman caliber quarterback, this is what you get. Even last year, he had a Heisman caliber quarterback and they were 7-5. I don't know who thought the stuff was going to be better this season without a Heisman caliber quarterback. I mean, I know the defense got better, but I mean, this is what Lincoln Riley's offense needs. Lincoln Riley is not a coach who's going to do well with I don't even want to say Miller Moss is a bad quarterback. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just think he's an okay quarterback that's being asked to throw the ball 50 times a game. Yeah. You throw interceptions too if you were throwing the ball 50 times a game and you weren't a Heisman level quarterback,
Just think, imagine if he had Cade McNamara back there throwing 50 times a game. Oof. Yeah. Woof.
Not saying Miller a little bit better than Cade McNamara.
I'm not saying Miller Moss is Cade McNamara. It's like but I don't know if I'd want CJ Stroud throwing 50 times a game. And that's not because you want balance.
Yeah. Well, and even this last game, like I said, Woody Marks 22 carries, 123 yards. Run the ball more. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
wild. We've made a Duck fan mad here, Zach. He says, Zach, stop talking about Lincoln Riley. We want him to stay at USC. You're talking about him. You'll wake up the AD to fire him. Angry emoji face. Come on, guys. We need Clay Helton 2.0 to stay. That's why we're quiet. Good strategy there, Duck fan one. He's
high level thinking there. High level thinking. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. But I want him fired.
I mean, I just don't want Lincoln Riley anywhere near this conference, especially if this is what he's going to bring to the table. I feel bad for Dan Lynn because I feel like Dan Lynn is actually a good defensive coordinator. It feels like he hitched his wagon to a coach that doesn't want to have good defense and, who Jeremy says that's disrespectful to Clay Helton.
Do you think if Michigan gets rid of their coordinators, Dan Lynn goes to Michigan?
I mean, maybe. He's always been a West Coast guy, hasn't he, though?
Well, he played at Penn State.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I missed that.
I met him at Penn State. So.
Oh, okay. Maybe he does then. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if Michigan has enough money after the NIL for Bryce Underwood to pony up some cash for a quarter.
I still don't think I don't think Underwood's going to Michigan.
I don't think so either. Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll be back after another commercial break. We're going to talk about the Minnesota win over Illinois. Sorry, Philip. We do have to talk about it, but we'll be right back. The Big Ten Huddle is brought to you by the College Huddle, the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. With contributors from 70 different schools, you will get in all kinds of analysis from all over the country. Go visit thecollegehuddle.com to find your team and read articles from all across so many fans and contributors. The College Huddle is fan-made, fan-driven, and fan-fueled. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we really appreciate everybody being here. If you are also a basketball fan, we want to let you know that our basketball episodes are coming every Thursday. We have games tomorrow night. Actually, for the very first time, Ohio State plays in a big game against Texas, and a lot of Big Ten teams are playing some lower-level teams that we'll be talking about on our Thursday podcast. Me and Kent will be talking about some basketball come Thursday night. But right now, we're talking about a Minnesota win over Illinois. Zach, I picked Minnesota. You picked Minnesota too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we picked Minnesota. There were some Illinois fans that want to talk about how Brett Bielema's never lost to PJ Fleck. And, I think there's some stuff to that every now and then. But, this was one in particular that I felt like things were different, right? Minnesota has Max Brosmer. Minnesota has Darius Taylor. I felt like this was a good opportunity for Minnesota to kind of keep right in the hot hand and, get another win here. And this team had not given up. They were counted out early on in the season against North Carolina, losing that one. But now they're coming back. They're roaring back. Should be in the top 25, but they didn't receive a single vote this last time. That's so stupid.
Don't get me started.
The coaches poll voted him 14 times to get in the top 25, but yeah. Anyway, but Minnesota comes out with the win here against a team in Illinois I still think is a good team. I don't think this is a reflection on a bad Illinois team. It was a home game for Illinois, right? It was a home game for Illinois.
Yep.
But I think this is a good Illinois team, and I think this Minnesota team just really believes they're really rocking and what they're doing right now. It's really impressive.
Yeah, this was not. I didn't think this was a case of a bad team on either side. I thought these are two top 25 teams playing each other. Like that was my takeaway from the game. And like I thought Illinois counterpunched when they got hit in the mouth. Like Josh McCray with that great run in the second quarter. Just had an awesome touchdown run. I thought, Minnesota.
Can we talk about that for a second though? Minnesota with the missed tackles. Josh McCray, not a fast dude.
Well, yeah,
I'm not trying to disparage the player, but man, that was not breakaway speed. That was, you were glad the touchdown, the end zone was as close as it was because Josh McCray, tough dude, but yeah, not the best breakaway speed.
It's not his forte, right?
But he got there, so we'll give him his credit anyway.
And you know what is what is his forte though? Breaking tackles.
Yep, and that's what he did.
Yeah, and he did that. So,
Yeah.
you don't need to be that fast for, if you're able to break tackles, but
There you go.
you could be Saquon Barkley who just pirouettes and jumps over a dude backwards, Go
That's not Josh McCray.
No, it's not Josh McCray. Go watch that, by the way. Just type in Saquon ridiculousness and
I
you'll
saw that. That was crazy that he did that. Anyway, go ahead.
anyway. Yeah, I thought it was two really good teams. I think, Brosmer played well. Um I I'll say the one thing that frustrated the heck out of me, and I think it was number 10 for Illinois, got disqualified because of a targeting penalty. And I just wanted to just take the official and be like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Like this rule needs to be changed. I
Yeah.
am so sick of people getting tossed for things that are just like not actually targeting. And it just drives me up a wall. It's like the point of this rule is for player safety, but we also have to acknowledge we play the game of football. It's
Right.
it's unsafe by nature. When people
I think it
shift
makes
into it,
sense. It makes sense to throw them out of the game if it is clear that they are trying to hurt the other player. Like there was a play, I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the quarterback was running forward and threw the ball, and the linebacker just like catapulted himself up under the dude's helmet and hit him. Like that's obvious. Like he was
yeah,
trying to hurt the quarterback on that play. If he's just going in for a hit and it's just incidental contact, like I get why they started doing that at the beginning. They wanted the game to change. The game has changed now, though. People are not headhunting and hitting tackles the same exact way that they were at the beginning. It makes no sense to be to be throwing these players out and then making them spend time out in the next game as well if it's in the second half. It doesn't make any sense.
it's dumb. It's so dumb. And I yeah, but outside of that, I thought it was a game. I thought it was a game that Illinois had a chance to tie up in the last couple minutes, and Ja Joyner gets the sack, fumble. I mean, I think Minnesota's their playmakers are playing, and you see it with Coy Parrish, you see it with Justin Wally, you see it with Darius Taylor, Daniel Jackson, Max Brosmer, Ja Joyner. They have dudes on that team.
They do.
And I think that's the thing that impresses me. Someone mentioned it earlier, that Penn State game coming up, Penn State better watch out because I think Minnesota might take that one in Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is it's at Minneapolis. I mean, you took USC down to the wire in that game, and USC is not a good enough team for that to be considered some, great national win or anything like that. But that was really the game that I felt like gave Minnesota their confidence to do what they should have done. And could you imagine if Minnesota hadn't lost that game to Michigan, if they didn't have that bogus offsides call on the onside kick? Like, could you imagine where this Minnesota team would be right now? They'd be top 20. They would be top 20 in the nation right now. They'd have that win over Michigan. They'd have that win over USC. Just catapult them early, to where they are in the season. And the perception around Illinois' loss here changes as well. Right now, Illinois isn't getting a single vote into the top 25, which is outrageous. That is just completely stupid. They're not getting a single vote. You lost to a good Minnesota team, but of course, because everybody views the SEC as every single, loss there is like, oh, it's okay. But in the Big Ten, it's like, oh no, Minnesota sucks. No, they don't suck. They're a good team, and so is Illinois. Like both these teams still deserve votes to be in the top 25.
Did either of these teams lose to Georgia State?
No.
Yeah. Why is Vandy ranked in the top 25? Get them out.
Yeah. It's true.
Georgia State stinks, and so does Vanderbilt. Put Minnesota and Illinois in. And how dare you have the audacity to give Washington votes over Illinois and Minnesota? It's outrageous. I am legitimately angry about this. Like, this is just frustrating.
We will
Voters
have time.
Are stupid.
We will have time Tuesday to react to the college football playoffs. That is my only hope right now. Is hopefully the college football playoffs has Minnesota in the top 25 as they should be. But maybe I'm putting too much hope in a playoff committee.
I'd have no hope.
Yeah,
they're gonna have like I tweeted out earlier. Vandy is ranked in the AP poll to justify Alabama getting into the top 12 of the playoff. And I know people will say the polls aren't related, but the CFP takes note of everything. And they will note that Vandy is seen as a top 25 team, but by people who write for newspapers that don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's Alabama writers and all those different kinds of ones. It's crazy how the Alabama writers are the ones ranking Vanderbilt and teams like that the highest. Wonder why. This is an interesting thought from Doug. He says teams like Minnesota will be the reason why playoffs will get expanded again. I do think they'll get expanded again. I don't know if it'll be for teams like Minnesota, but it's possible. Do you have any thoughts on that, Zach?
I don't know. I think it really depends how the product is viewed after the next couple years.
Yeah. It's going to depend. I mean, they're going to be expanded to 16. I think that's all but almost for sure now at this point, but we'll see. We'll see. Dave made a comment I wanted to get back to really fast. Dave's analysis was the total balance on offense by the Gophers. Great defense, played special teams pretty well, minus the fake punt. What'd you think of the fake punt, Zach?
So I'll be honest, I actually missed that one. I missed that play. So I have no thoughts on it.
Yeah. It was an interesting one. I mean, I get, he had space, he was open, he went for it. Just sometimes your eyes get a little too big, I guess. But I mean, I don't hate it. I like trying fake punts and stuff. It makes the game more exciting, especially in a game like this where both teams are trying to do anything they can to gain an inch. I mean, obviously, you look at it. It doesn't look like the best call because of the way it worked out, but still, like, I don't know. I like that part of college football exists still. It's not all so professionalized that we still have fake punts and stuff like that. I like that. Last thing on this, Zach, and then we'll move on. This game felt like the Illinois Penn State game to me, where it was neck and neck, battling with each other. You saw so much, and then late game, Luke Altmaier, the fumble that gives the team a good chance there to win the game, and that's how it turns out. Were you kind of getting the same vibes there, Luke Altmaier fumble at the end of the game type of stuff?
No, I mean I see where you're coming from. I did feel like Minnesota and Illinois was a bit more even. I think in the score, at least score-wise, I thought Penn State and Illinois was even, but I thought I came away thinking Penn State was easily the better team. I thought Illinois fought.
Yeah.
But I thought Penn State I thought Minnesota and Illinois were a bit more even.
Yeah, I can see that. I think, at the end of the day, Minnesota made the plays that they needed to do to win the game, and credit to Minnesota. It was a really good game. Both teams played really well, and that's how it goes sometimes. Random question from John. He says, for both JR and Zach, if you guys are able to get around to it, what inspired you to become Ohio State fans? I mean, my family grew up in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. My dad went to Ohio State. My mom and dad met there. I didn't go to Ohio State because they didn't offer my degree. That's kind of the funny thing, big university like that. But I grew up Columbus, Ohio, and when you grow up in Columbus, Ohio, it's just basically in your blood. So, what about you, Zach?
Yeah, my mom grew up in Gahanna, Ohio. No, Pataskala. She grew up in Pataskala. Okay. But then,
so my mom grew up.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I was born in Columbus, but I didn't live there long. I actually moved to New Jersey. I mean, before I can remember. And my mom, I think it was my mom's mission to make me an Ohio State fan. And of course, Rutgers was, college football was not big in Jersey in the 80s and 90s. And so even though Rutgers was there, it really wasn't there. And so Ohio State was like, the one that my mom kind of got me to. And then I think it really clinched it. Like, I grew up in the 90s with Michigan crushing Ohio State. And so hated it. And Jim Tressel's speech, I think, was probably the clincher for me. Like, not the first win even, but like The fact that he knew the day, like in 310 days in Ann Arbor, Michigan, like your boys will be proud of our young men. And I was like, oh, this dude gets it. And then they went out and did what they did, and I was like, all right, I'm in. And I've been on the train ever since.
I can tell you the moment I got on the Indiana train was when Kirk Cinetti went out there and said, Purdue sucks, Michigan sucks, and so does Ohio State.
Dude, if he beats all three of those teams this year,
oh my gosh.
and then goes to Florida.
No, he's not going.
I don't think he's going to Florida.
I don't think Indiana lets that happen.
No,
this is funny. We have other Ohio State fans chiming in now. Cameron says, I watched Ted Ginn Jr. play. I was sold.
Yeah.
Doug says he graduated from Franklin Heights. I definitely remember Franklin Heights. That's awesome, Doug. And Troy said, my dad got me a Spielman jersey when I was in high school. I became a Buckeye fan. Thank God he didn't get me. Ouch, Troy. Ouch. That's funny. All right, let's talk about Indiana now. We got to stay on task here, Zach. We want to get to the Heisman talk. We got to stay on task. All right. So, Indiana, Michigan State. Michigan State goes up 10 points. People are talking about it. Oh no, is this Indiana team for real? Can Curtis Rourke come back from injury? Is he okay? There's a little bit of questions there on offense. Michigan State moving the ball. How about 47 unanswered points by the Hoosiers? Zach, the Hoosiers coming back with the 47-10 win, 263 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, returning from injury. Curtis Rourke, Amari Farrell's defense was pivotal with 2 interceptions, contributing to Indiana's sitting defense that held, or stifling defense that held Michigan State to negative 24 rushing yards. Zach, this was the first time all season that Indiana went down. I don't know if any other team is going to want to be ahead of Indiana at any point this season because Indiana got mad and Indiana killed what was in front of them.
Yes, they did. I have a hot take. I felt like this was more about Michigan State's incompetence than it was Indiana's excellence.
Wow. Trying to take some away from Cignetti, huh?
No, yeah. So I think Indiana, Indiana beat, they killed them. I'm not trying to take anything away, but even the stat, the negative yards. Okay, on 6 carries between Ryan Eckley, the punter, and Tommy Schuster, the backup quarterback, who is a statue.
Yeah,
negative 65 yards. On 6 carries. My gosh. If you just take that away, it's still not great. But there, I'm just saying, I think the statistics are a little overblown because I think Michigan State imploded more. I think it was just as much, if not more so, about the implosion of Michigan State than it was Indiana's execute, which Indiana was good. I'm not trying to take anything away from Indiana, but I think if people look at the score, we were talking about this with Kent last night. If people are looking at this score and doing score watching and be like, well, Ohio State only beat them by 31 and Oregon only beat them by 24 or 21 or whatever. I just don't think that's the right context to look at this. I think the context is Indiana is superior to Michigan State. I think Michigan and Ohio State might actually tell us more about Indiana. And I that's not to say that I think Indiana won't win those games. It's just, I just don't think we learn a lot about Indiana. I think we learned that Michigan State is just, they can be a dumpster fire. And they were they can have a good game like they did against Iowa, or they could be a dumpster fire. And for 55 minutes or 50 minutes, Michigan State was dumpster fire Michigan State.
I mean, we had seen improvement from Michigan State, right? Things were getting better for them. We saw after the Ohio State and Oregon game, they beat Iowa, and you see a little bit of improvement there. Yes, they don't beat Michigan, but you still did see this team, battle and fight and have the chance to win there at the end of the game. I think they, had other opportunities that could have won the game. But, yeah, at the end of the day, yes, Michigan State did implode, but Indiana also made them implode. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, there's two equal parts where, like, Indiana was just destroying Michigan State up front. Indiana was just getting so much pressure on the passer, and their secondary was doing such a good job on the back end that Michigan State really had no answers, and their players started panicking. And so, yes, there's definitely something to Michigan State imploded, but I still think Indiana played a great game, and I still think Indiana played a big part in Michigan State imploding that much and just completely destroying them in this one. 47 unanswered points, and it looked like after the first 20, Michigan State just got down and they were like, well, we're going to lose this one, so, how much more should we even try at this point?
Well, and I think that's part of my point, though, JR, is I think – and maybe this is me trying. I'm trying to pump the brakes a little bit, not because I hate Indiana, like I don't, but
I'm just trying to look at it realistically. I get it.
Yeah, like there's a part of me that wonders, like, what's it going to look like next week when they face a team like, and Michigan might implode too, but I don't think Michigan will. Like, I still think Indiana might win by double digits next week. I just am curious to see, okay, what happens when the talent level really ratchets up? Because they have not had that. And, the only, like, really the premier players, like Childs, when he's good, can be really good, and Nick Marsh. And, I mean, they sliced through him. And then Childs turned into bad Childs, which, again, part of that's Indiana. Like, guys.
Pass rush was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. I like John, I'm not a non-believer in Indiana. I'm just pushing back against, are they the elite? Are they an elite team? I don't know. I think they could be. But again, it's really hard to tell with their schedule. And it's really hard to tell because Michigan State, yes, Indiana did that to them, but like so have other teams. So like I just don't, I don't know. Like it was a good win, but I'm not. I felt like it's more a referendum on how much of a dumpster fire Michigan State could be.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I'm messing with you a little bit when I talk about some of the stuff, but because I am on that Indiana hype train, right? I believe in this Indiana team so much, and one of the reasons I do is because of the confidence this team plays with. I mean, what you saw against Indiana and Michigan State after Indiana started to get up was you saw a supremely confident Indiana team going up against a Michigan State team that had lost all confidence. And I think that's the biggest thing with Indiana right now is this team does not lack confidence at all. Every single time they step out onto the field, they believe they're the best team on that field. I don't know if that's Signetti. I don't know if that's just who they are as players. I tend to believe it's Signetti, but for whatever reason, they have just made themselves believe they are the best team that steps onto any field, and they are going to beat whoever's in front of them. Now, that is going to be tested against Michigan because Michigan, like I said, does have possibly four first-round picks, most likely 3 first-round picks, and that's a talent level that Indiana has not seen yet this season. But I still contend confidence is a huge thing in college football. It doesn't do as much for you in the NFL. In the NFL, the skill is so even that, it can almost be anything here and there. But confidence is such a big thing in college football. And for me, Indiana got down and that confidence didn't waver. And so that's why for me, against this Michigan team coming up, I don't see Indiana not winning by double digits because of the confidence and because of this coaching staff that Michigan has. Like, I look at this game and it's like, yeah, Michigan has the talent to battle with them, but Indiana's a team with way more confidence. They're going to be at home, and this Michigan team is like, how in the world did we get to this point? And so it's going to be a big game when they go against Ohio State, because I think at that time Ohio State will have a lot of confidence coming off Northwestern and Purdue, and I can't wait. It's going to be a fantastic game as long as Indiana does take care of business against Michigan, which they should. But as long as they do that,
it could be a top 5 matchup in the AP poll at that point.
Should
be depending on. I mean, it should be. You're right.
Yeah.
I just want to address a couple things. That me pumping the brakes is not again, like I'm not trying to take anything away from Indiana. Someone was saying you want Indiana to lose. I don't. I'm like I hope Indiana drops 50 on Michigan. Like that's a no-brainer. But I just want to be clear too. Between Penn State and Indiana, I think we both agreed on this. Indiana's the more dangerous team. As an Ohio State fan, I'm terrified to play Indiana. So like
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Indiana.
Yeah. I think you're just looking at it and you're saying there are aspects of this game that, yes, Indiana did play a very good game, but there's a reason why they went out and scored 47 unanswered points. Talent level was a part of it, but also Michigan State imploding, which happened with Nebraska as well. So,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, I think confidence and pressure and how much, they were doing to them, I think that works into it too. So,
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think that's a good take by you.
yeah.
So
Crazy game. So, I mean, going from here, I don't know what Michigan State does coming out of this game. I meant to look up the schedule. I apologize. I'll bring that up really fast. But Michigan State, Jonathan Smith now is 4-5. He was looking as, one of the best head coaches hires in the Big Ten, and they lose to Michigan, and you're like, oh, okay, that one makes a little bit of sense. Could have won that game, but it was at Michigan, that kind of stuff, and then you lose to Indiana the way you do. It's like, no shame in losing to Indiana, but your team can't just implode like that. Now they have to go at Illinois. I like Illinois in that one, and I think it's going to be a hard game for Michigan State. Now, if Michigan State plays mistake-free football, they have a good chance of beating Illinois, but with what Illinois has been able to do to teams this season with mistake football, it doesn't look like it. And then they end the year with Purdue and Rutgers. So this Michigan State team should be a bowl team at the end of the year, but if Purdue or Rutgers comes up with something later on, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Rutgers can adjust after the bye week. Because I think, they still have they had big hopes too. So I wonder, I'd be curious to see if Michigan State Rutgers is for a bowl bid.
Yeah.
That game at the end of the season.
That would be crazy. What's Rutgers at right now? The Rutgers schedule, they're 4-4.
Minnesota at Maryland, Illinois at Michigan State.
They should win that Maryland one. So it could be if they meet Maryland. So, all right. We'll be right back, everybody. Another commercial break, and then we're going to talk about this Ohio State Penn State game. Stay with us. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we want to appreciate everybody for watching. Please do, if you listen on YouTube, also go and follow us on podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all those different things. You can follow us there. So if you ever miss an episode, you can go listen over there as well. All right, Zach, let's talk about this Ohio State-Penn State game. Ohio State comes out with the win. Few misplays here and there, but Penn State was not able to score a single touchdown in the game on offense. They do get the pick six early on, but Ohio State comes back down 10-0. And I mean, I was, as an Ohio State fan, I was devastated at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Like, there's not even fight out of this team. Penn State goes right down the field and gets a field goal on the very first drive, yada, yada. All this stuff was going on through my mind. And then the way Ohio State answered, that's when I thought this game is nowhere near over, because Ohio State just answered in a gutsy way, running the ball, passing the ball. Will Howard came right back through that touchdown pass to Emeka Egbuka. And at the end of the day, Ohio State made mistakes on offense, but it was their defense that saved them. That goal line stand at the end of the game, and then Ohio State runs the ball for 4 to 5 minutes to close out the game. What did you think, Zach?
I'm like full of hot takes today. Ohio State was significantly the better team. Significantly.
Yeah.
And if not for critical errors, we're talking about like a 31 or 38-6 win. But the reality is they were self-inflicted wounds, and I think actually that was probably better for Ohio State in the long run because they had to fight through their own adversity, had to fight through their own doubts, which I think that's been the problem of this team is they get in their own head.
Yeah.
Like I think that's been a trademark of Ryan Day teams, if I'm honest. And I think you could see Ryan Day at the end of this game just elated with how his team battled and fought. And like, listen, Will Howard, like, he cost his team probably like 17 points in this game between the pick six, the fumble, missing Carnell Tate. Like, but the reality is this team fought and he fought like crazy to win this game. Probably the play that was the greatest microcosm, and I love it so much, is the 4th and 1 to Jelani Thurman, who's like this backup. He has really been hyped up for Ohio State fans, but like rarely used tight end who's a sophomore, bobbles it, can't make
Well,
a
the play had
play,
broken down
makes a
too.
play.
Like,
Yeah, broke down. Will Howard avoids a sack, throws it. You're like, oh, easy completion. Oh my gosh, she bobbled it. Like Gus Johnson didn't know how to call that play as
yeah.
he's like calling the play-by-play. And it was honestly, I think that was a microcosm of the game was everything that we should have done. Ohio State, I'm saying goodness, that they should have done. They didn't always do, but they got out of their own heads when they needed to, and they played really good complementary football and finished out. And I think that's going to serve them well down the road.
Yeah, I think my only pushback I would give to Ohio State just dominated and was the better team, and they would have won by 2 or 3 scores if things had gone differently. Was Penn State did have a couple of calls go against them, right? They had the call of the stepping over the player, which I mean that's just weak. Like that is such a weak call to make there. It looked like he was just stepping. Like it didn't look. I mean, maybe he said something, and maybe we didn't see it, we didn't hear it. I don't know, but it looked like he was just getting off the player. So I don't know how you can call that one unless, like I said, something was being said. And then the fumble there, which was reviewed and called an incomplete pass. I think it probably was, but I also think Penn State fans have a little bit, of a point there to say it wasn't, a fumble. But I felt like it was close enough that it could have gone either way. Thankfully, as an Ohio State fan, it went Ohio State's way. But I think there were definitely some additional mistakes that if they had gone Penn State's way, you could have seen Penn State in there at the end of the game. Like Penn State had the chance to tie the game. They could have done it, but I think it was just the epitome of Ohio State becoming the team who they want to be, the toughness, everything else that they talk about. You get the goal line stand, and then you run the ball 11 times, however many times it was, for 4 to 5 minutes straight. It's like, and that's why I don't really subscribe so much to the referees thing on this with the Penn State fans. Like, you had the chance to tie the game there at the end. You had the opportunity. You were on the 4-yard line, 5-yard line, whatever it was, with 4 downs, and you didn't convert. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm a homer. Call me a homer. That's fine. But the way I look at it, it's not like the refs didn't even give you the opportunity. You had the opportunity there to tie it, and you didn't do it.
Oh, well, and to that, so I think with all the penalties, the one that I hated the most was the taunting one. But even that one's in the rule book. And like I didn't love it. But I think at the same time, you got to go tell that player you don't step over the dude. Or like if he did say something, we don't know what was said, if anything was said. And so I hated it in the moment. I'm like, if you're not going to call Igbinosun on a pass interference call that was pretty blatant early in the game, you should not call that taunting penalty. But by the letter of the rule, don't step over the guy. Like, and
Yeah.
I think the incomplete fumble, like, I don't know, like I feel like I felt like in real time, and this is the thing, in real time, I thought it should have been called incomplete, and they didn't because the refs are instructed to let it play out.
Right.
And so I think,
Which, credit to them, that's what I want to see. I want to see the play out, because if you do call
yeah,
that a fumble, then whoever recovered it doesn't have the opportunity to take it back. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, yeah. But I think that's the indisputable thing. I get heated about a lot because I'm like, if you have any doubt, then you can't overturn it. And
mhm.
I agree. I had a little bit of doubt. But I think with that rule, you have to be careful with it because if you are telling your refs to let it play out and you think it actually was an incomplete pass, like it just gets complicated.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I think it was it a football move? I don't know. I don't think so. And so I think that's the question. It's like, how do you define football move? I don't know. I thought it was fairly I thought it was fairly clear that it was incomplete.
Yeah.
I
I
and
felt like it was too. I'm just saying, I think Penn State fans have a point. I don't think it was one of those ones where it was like clear and obvious, and you kind of make fun of the other team for for calling it. But in fairness, I think that Ohio State fans had a point with the fumble into the end zone, where it's like, okay, if the rule is the ball is out of bounds when it goes out of bounds, how was Will Howard's left leg in bounds when the right foot was barely in bounds? Like, you know, and that's just where I look at it, is like there were questionable calls on both sides,
yeah.
right? This is a game where there's questionable calls on both sides. There's ticky tack calls and stuff like that. Sure, the ticky tack calls went more against Penn State than they did Ohio State, but guess what? If they're calling a game where they're letting you be physical on the outside, get your wide receivers in the weight room. My word, Penn State. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I'm not trying to be a homer here, but it is a disgrace that these wide receivers are Penn State's wide receivers. Like, these guys are weak. They have they are not out there fighting. It's just I they were getting pushed around all day by the Ohio State
Yeah.
secondary. And I felt like one of the reasons why James Franklin was telling these referees, hey, watch for holding, watch for this, watch for that, it was because he knew his wide receivers weren't tough enough. He knew his wide receivers weren't strong enough to battle with the handsy, tough nature of the Ohio State secondary. And so he was trying to do anything he could with trying to get a penalty here and there. But the referees, I mean, early on in the game, they showed they're going to let you play, and that was definitely not in Penn State's favor.
Yeah, I think someone it might have been John who mentioned that Drew Aller's not it. I thought Aller actually played pretty well in this game. The problem was the receivers.
Yeah,
Like I
totally agree.
and I think that honestly the biggest difference between Indiana and Oregon and Penn State is Indiana and Oregon have both receivers and corners that will be physical with you. But
Yeah.
like Penn State does not. Like Tyler Warren, who's a tight end, is the only guy. And even he was struggling a little bit. Like he had a couple of big plays, but like, Lathan Ransom had some really nice coverage on him. Like it was hard to get those guys free. And a lot of people are blaming Andy Kotelnicki for not going to his playmakers. Look, the problem is they weren't open.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go back
Even
and watch
even
that
Tyler
film.
Warren. I mean, they kept putting Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom, who these safeties have been much better in their coverage this year. I don't think Caleb Downs, I don't know how his coverage was as much last year, but these guys were much better in their coverage, and they really were up to the task against Tyler Warren. All right, Zach, I have two more things, and then if you have anything else, obviously we can get to that. So, first thing, I've watched multiple podcasts today about this game. Just be careful who you listen to. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to do that, but I heard from multiple podcasts today talk about how Ohio State couldn't run the ball because they only ran for 4.4 yards per carry. just I don't know how you can watch this game and say Ohio State couldn't run the ball. Yes, they had 4.4 yards per carry if you include Will Howard's sacks. You take away the sacks and Will Howard ran for 9 carries for 39 yards. Like, you also had Quinshon Judkins, 14 carries for 95 yards, 6.8 yards per carry. Trevion Henderson, 10 carries, 54 yards, 5.4 yards per carry. That's not that hard of math to do. And it's not like either of these guys received all those yards on one big run. And the other point was, Ohio State only had one run of 15 yards or more. Doesn't a high yards per carry without the big runs indicate that you actually did run the ball really well because it wasn't all yards on just one run here or there? Like, would you rather have Caleb Johnson against Michigan State, who couldn't run the ball to save his life, but he got over 100 yards rushing because he had the one play that was 75 yards? Like, is that good rushing? No, it's not. But of course, there's people out there right now talking about how Ohio State couldn't run the ball, and I don't understand how you watch the game and think that. Obviously, either they didn't watch the game or they just didn't pay close enough attention and they just looking at the box score at the end, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Did they get it wrong and think Penn State couldn't run the ball?
Yeah,
because
maybe.
I don't know how you watch this game, especially after watching them play Nebraska, and say they couldn't run the ball. Like,
right.
Sir, Penn State had good plays against the run game at times, but to say they didn't run the ball well at all, like, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Like, Judkins and Henderson had nearly 150 yards on 24 carries combined.
Right.
That's really good. What are we doing?
Right. I don't get it. John asked, "What about the 5 most underrated Heisman contenders?" Yes, we're going to talk about that next. No worries. We're getting through all the games.
We just talked through.
We are talking through a lot of everything right now. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Zach. I mean, at the end of the day, Nicholas Singleton, six rushes for 15 yards. Katron Allen, 12 rushes for 27 yards. You put that together, and that's less than 2.5 yards per carry. Penn State was not able to run the ball. Their best running threat was Drew Aller dropping back to pass and then running forward because the defensive ends were speed rushing past Drew Aller, which, if that's your best offense for Penn State, is Drew Aller trying to step up in the pocket and run for it, I think you're going to feel pretty okay with that. That leads into my next point, which is, Zach, should Penn State, after realizing their wide receivers weren't going to be able to do anything to Ohio State, should Penn State had benched Drew Aller and put Bo Prabula in the second half? Because I think a good coach would have done that.
I disagree. And the reason is, like, I think it looked really good against Wisconsin. I think
I'm just saying that the wide receivers were able to do nothing against Ohio State. They weren't able to do anything against Ohio State. You have 2 star running backs here who weren't able to do anything because there was no other like creativity there to try and do anything. They did like the read option to Drew Aller where they tried to hand it off to him and he run to the side. Ohio State wasn't getting fooled by any of it. Like, at a certain point, like, I don't think Drew Aller is a bad quarterback. I think Drew Aller is a good quarterback. He just doesn't have wide receivers. At a certain point, like, you just have to realize, 1, we don't have the wide receivers to get separation. 2, if he's going to drop back and not have anybody open, I'd rather Bo Prabula be running the ball than Drew Aller.
Yeah, but I think if you put Prabula in there, there's no threat of a deep pass anyway. And so then you just crowd the box. Like, that was because I had thought about that even before the game. It's like, would I rather have Drew Aller as a statue with a bum knee, or would I rather have Bo Prabula? And I was like, I think honestly I'd prefer Aller, because our pass rush hasn't really proven much. And like, Aller can still he can still push the ball down the field. Prabula isn't that guy.
Right.
And so I hear what you're saying, but I think they tried that by bringing Prabula in on some of the packages, and it wasn't effective. Like, he had Yeah, I think he had one. Well, he had one carry for 0 yards,
Yeah,
which is not it's small sample size, but like he tried to hand things off, and I just don't think it would have made much difference.
right. No, I hear you. I hear you. I guess when I watched Texas A&M versus LSU, everything changed when the running quarterback came in the game for
Yeah,
Texas A&M. And that's what I felt like, not to that same degree. Obviously, I don't think, Penn State was going to, score 5 touchdowns in the second half against Ohio State, but I think there could have been a better dynamic threat there because I agree with you. Bo Prabila wouldn't have brought the downfield threat, but the downfield threat wasn't there anyway. The separation wasn't there. I mean, Drew Aller could be throwing dots all game long, and you saw what happened in the end zone. He threw a good pass to the wide receiver. The wide receiver dropped it, and David Singleton picked it off. So it's like, for me, that would have been the one where it's like, okay, we can't pass the ball. Unless it's Tyler Warren, we just can't pass the ball.
Yeah. I think that's part of the frustration. Like I saw someone who I really respect say like Drew Aller is just he's just a guy. And I'm like, I think if you're looking at this game and saying he's just a guy, you're watching the wrong game because he was throwing some dots. Like
Yeah.
that interception was not on Aller.
No. That hit the guy
like
in the hands.
Yeah. Just Abe Nosen made a great play, but
Yeah.
also like Wallace should have had a touchdown there.
Yep. But he dropped it, and then it went right into Igbinosen's hands.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's crazy. All right, Zach, let's talk about Heisman contenders. You good with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we are going to talk about the 5 most underrated Big Ten Heisman contenders. We'll go through the odds right now. These are the FanDuel odds. Dylan Gabriel is first in the Big Ten at plus 280. Curtis Rourke at plus 2,000. Will Howard at plus 15,000. Drew Aller tied with Will Howard at plus 15,000. Jeremiah Smith at plus 15,000, tied with them. And then Caleb Johnson rounds it out at plus 30,000 there. Zach, let's go back and forth. You can use guys on the odds list here if you want to, or you can use other guys. Let's go back and forth. I'm going to let you go first on your 5th player that should be considered for the Heisman out of the Big Ten.
So we're going 5-1.
Yeah, so five is like least likely. 1 is like this guy should be considered for the Heisman. I'm not going to use Dylan Gabriel just because he's already up there at the top. It doesn't mean I don't think he should be a Heisman guy. It's just I think his name's already up there. But you can use him if you want.
Okay. Well, I gave my 5 most likely. That's kind of how I thought about it. But
that's fine.
Number 5, I have Will Howard.
Okay.
I feel like he has higher odds. I think the problem is I think nobody is going to give him the credit because he has all the playmakers. Like a lot of people just say, "Oh, he doesn't need to be great." It's like, well, then is he really going to be considered?
Right.
So like, I think if he like the next 4 games, if he goes off and say he has like 5 touchdowns a game, throws for 300 plus yards a game and runs for 50, like that changes things, and then has a big Big Ten championship game. But I think he's actually farther back behind the pack because I think of the perception that he's really there just to steady the ship.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I think for me, my number 5 is going to be it's going to be actually Ty Felton from Maryland. I know he hasn't been great the past few weeks, but he's had a really good season. He's put together the game log, hasn't looked great lately, but what he was able to do at the beginning of the season, he's had 100-yard receiving games in 5 in 5 of their 8 games. He has had all kinds of touchdowns in almost every single game, but 3, I mean, it's been hard for him with how much teams are going after him, but the fact that this guy doesn't even have odds or anything like that, I mean, it speaks to Maryland not being a contender at all, but I think this guy's having a really, really good season and somebody that's being underrated. Almost 1,000 yards receiving on the year already.
Yeah. That's insane. He's really good.
He is.
Really good.
All right, your next one.
4 is Tyler Warren. I think the fact that he's so heavily utilized in different packages is going to be attractive. Like just like how teams talk about Travis Hunter. Like obviously he's not getting the same publicity, but I think he's the best tight end in the country. They use him in so many different spots. Like people were clamoring for him to get a touch in the red zone at the goal line because they know he's the best player. So I think he is like I thought he was my midseason player of the year in the Big Ten. He's so good. But I'm also aware that he's not going to get as much publicity because he's a tight end.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good pick. My next one, this one might shock some people, but man, he's having a really, really good season. IU fans, I know maybe I love IU a little bit too much right now, but give me Mikhail Kamara, the defensive end for Indiana.
There you
Nine
go.
and a half sacks so far this season. He has had a sack in each of the past 5 games, 7.5 sacks in the past 5 games. I know he's not up there because of the schedule, yada yada yada, but there is nobody that is more of a menace right now to opposing offensive lines more than Mikhail Kamara. I think that he is fantastic. I wanted to put a defensive player on this list. I wanted to get at least one on there because we're talking about underrated guys. I mean, he has just been fantastic, and against this Michigan offensive line, I don't see it letting up anytime soon. This Michigan offensive line is not very good in pass protection. He could have another big game in this one. Watch for Kamara to possibly get 2, 3, maybe even 4 sacks in that game.
I clearly misunderstood this assignment because when I was thinking about it, I was like not thinking about under the radar guys. I was just thinking, oh, who Big Ten best
That's
odds?
okay. I like that we're kind of going out of different ways because we
Yeah.
have different guys. We're not just naming the same guy back and forth.
Yeah, Kamara is a beast. He's really good. So in my non-underrated list, I have Caleb Johnson 3. And it's actually amazing that he's 3 and only 3 because the dude is ridiculous. 170 carries, 1,279 yards. He has 19 touchdowns. Like that's insane. Like he's just having a ridiculous season. And like I think I'm just gonna look up the stats real quick for running. He's second in the country in rushing yards. I believe he's second in the country in total touchdowns. He's second in rushing average, rushing per carry. Like all of that's to Ashton Genty. And the only reason why he's not getting more buzz is because Iowa is 6-3. And that is not his fault. That is Cade McNamara's fault. So if there's a bad worst player in the world or player that drags everybody down
in the world,
I'm putting Cade McNamara at the top of that list.
There's a worst player in the world. I love that. All right,
No
we're on
offense,
number 3, correct?
Number 3.
Okay, my number 3 is actually also Caleb Johnson. So, I mean, just echoing everything that you said, I think that there's a lot of running backs right now in like the SEC and stuff like that that people are falling all over for. Dylan Sampson being one at Tennessee. They're talking about Jarquez Hunter a little bit here and there, but I mean, Caleb Johnson, this guy is basically doing what Ashton Genty is doing with a Mountain West schedule and stuff like that, with a Big Ten schedule. These are much better defenses than Ashton Genty is seeing. And I'm not trying to take away from Ashton Genty. I know he's having a historic season, and I actually really like Ashton Genty, so I'm not trying to go at him at all. I'm just saying, you look at the stats, you look at like the breakaway percentage, you look at the big runs, you look at him and how he's able to get yards after contact, breaking tackles, all that stuff. His numbers are on par with Ashton Genty. The only problem he has is he's not at a group of 5 school that is going to possibly make the playoffs. You know, I mean, if he was at a group of 5 school doing this and going to make the playoffs, he'd be getting all the love because he'd have the national level. But you're completely right. He has a quarterback that brought him down, and he's not being considered nearly enough because this team should be a playoff contender, but they aren't because they didn't go with Brendan Sullivan early enough in the season.
Yep. Just to your point too about the schedule, Boise State, their strength of schedule is 70th in the country. Iowa's, believe it or not, is a fairly strong 38th, which actually is ahead of Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Miami, not Tennessee. Iowa's got a stronger strength of schedule than people realize, at least
Yeah.
according to the numbers.
I mean, you think about what they've done and who they played against. They played against Ohio State, which, I mean, obviously is no slouch in that one. I'm trying to look up the rest of their schedule. I mean, Wisconsin, that last game, I know people are going to look down on them after the game, but it wasn't bad. Washington's getting top 25 votes, and they beat them. They played against them. Minnesota should be a ranked team. Iowa State is up there around top 10. I don't remember if they're top 10 after this week or not, but yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty tough schedule.
Yep. Yep.
So, do you have number 2?
I do. My number 2 is Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke is the man. And I actually struggled between him and Gabriel for number 1. And so I give away my number 1, but my number 2 is Curtis Rourke. My number 1 is Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is just Oregon's the best team in the country right now. And I think he gets the nod there, but I would love to see Curtis Rourke be in New York. And I think he should be. Regardless of what happens in Columbus, I think Curtis Rourke should be in New York with what he's doing with this Indiana team.
Rourke in New York. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, my second, I guess I'll go second and first. My second is actually Will Howard from Ohio State, and I'm not trying to be a homer here, but he does have a really good QBR. He just had the moment against Penn State where it's not going to show up on the stat sheet. Stat sheet wise, he's going to look bad, right? He had the fumble into the end zone, that kind of stuff. But I mean, if we're looking at players and what they mean to their team and what they bring to their team, obviously Will Howard is not the best player on Ohio State. But looking in years past, what he's done for this team, for the juice, the toughness, all that kind of stuff, it's evident what he has done has been so huge for this team this year as a leader, everything else. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but for me, like, if you're actually watching college football and appreciating, not just going through and looking at the stats, but actually appreciating what's going on, I think you have to look at Will Howard and what he's doing. And then my number 1 is your number 2, Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke is not getting nearly enough consideration for the Heisman right now. On FanDuel, he is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He is the 6th highest behind Jackson Dart and Dylan Gabriel, and Cam Ward are the only 3 quarterbacks in front of him. Now look, Jackson Dart is leading the nation in passing yards right now, right? He is going out there and getting a lot of passing yards and stuff like that. But let's also be sure to look at against Furman, he had 400 plus passing yards. Against Middle Tennessee, he had nearly 400 passing yards. Against Wake Forest, he had nearly 400 passing yards and a pick. Against Georgia Southern, he had nearly 400 passing yards. Like, yeah, you should be leading the nation when you play that much of a cupcake out of conference schedule your first 4 games of the season. And then what does he do the very first time he sees good competition? And I say good competition in a 3-5, 3-6 Kentucky team, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, but he was sacked 4 times in that game. A couple weeks later, he sees competition at LSU, a team that Miller Moss tore apart. Right? I mean, Miller Moss completely took them apart. Now, granted, it was at LSU. I'm going to give them credit there. But 284 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 6 sacks. I don't know, man. In the biggest games of the season, when CJ Stroud didn't perform, everybody said, oh, he can't be the Heisman contender because he's not performing in the biggest games of the season. But apparently that doesn't work for Jackson Dart, because Jackson Dart can go out there in the SEC and beat up on an Arkansas team that everybody knows is terrible, right? Arkansas is not a good team. Everybody knows this is not a good team. They have a playmaker at quarterback that can occasionally do some things for him to win games, and he throws for 500 yards in that one. Everybody falls out of their chair. Oh, my gosh. Praise Jackson Dart. Yeah, okay. If we were letting quarterbacks in the Big Ten like Curtis Rourke go out there and throw for 400 plus yards and all their out of conference games and stuff like that, it'd be feeling a whole lot better for them too. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I still think Curtis Rourke needs the big moment against Ohio State to really be considered, heavily for the award. But it's just it's blatant hypocrisy at this point that you're looking at Jackson Dart and saying, "Oh yeah, passing leader in college football," and it's like, well, yeah, he's a passing leader in college football because he beat up on terrible teams. Like,
Yeah. Well,
what are we doing
and
here?
that's the way their offense is run. Like if we're
Right,
being honest, like Indiana, as much as great as Curtis Rourke has been, he plays in a complementary offense. Like
right,
that run game has been like they have not felt the need to just be pass happy, which is not what Ole Miss is. And like Ole Miss has struggled at like Ole Miss has 2 losses.
right,
Like they're on the verge of missing out on the playoff. They probably are going to miss the playoff.
right.
Like Indiana's not. Like honestly, one of the biggest benefits of this weekend was I think it really did clear the way for 4 playoff teams for the Big Ten.
Yeah. As long as Indiana only loses once or not at all, and as long as Penn State doesn't lose another time, they should for sure have 4 playoff teams. I think you get a little iffy if Penn State loses to Minnesota. You get a little iffy,
Yeah.
and I don't think it should be iffy. But if Indiana loses to Ohio State,
Yeah.
the voters are always weird.
Yeah, it gets a little weird, but yeah. So
Go
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna bring up one more guy really fast. The other guy I'm gonna bring up because everybody's talking about he's the Heisman favorite right now, and that's what everybody's knocking Curtis Rourke for right now. Is he can't be the Heisman favorite because he doesn't play the best schedule. Well, Zach, you tell me. I'm gonna read Miami's schedule really fast, and if you don't mind, pull up the strength of schedule. I haven't looked at it between Indiana and Miami because I would bet they're pretty similar. At Florida, A&M. That's an FCS team. Ball State, South Florida, or out South Florida, Virginia Tech, at Cal, at Louisville, Florida State, Duke. 0 ranked teams, a lot of teams with losing records, teams that aren't in the FBS. Like, what are we doing here?
Yep.
We're just going to award this guy for throwing 5 touchdowns against Duke? Like, it's the team that Mike Wright threw touchdowns against. Like,
Ooh,
I
that's hardball right there.
This is a guy that had a -1 QBR at one point in his career, and he's throwing touchdowns against Duke. And we're going to give Cam Ward all this praise. You know who he didn't throw any touchdowns against? Florida State. 0 touchdowns against them, sacked 4 times. In the last 5 games, Zach, are we just not going to care about if a quarterback gets sacked all the time and holds on to the ball forever? 9, 13, 15 sacks in the last 5 games. 15 sacks. That's an average of 3 sacks per game. You tell me anybody that wants their quarterback being sacked 3 times. And then, of course, he's throwing the ball 50, 32, 35, 41. He's throwing the ball so many different times. They have no running attack. Somebody put in the chat earlier, one of the reasons why Rourke isn't getting the consideration is because he does have a running attack with him. I hate that this award is all stats based. I wish people would actually watch what is going on in the field. It's like what I talked about with Will Howard. You actually watch what's going on on the field with Curtis Rourke. He is throwing the ball over the middle. He is throwing dots on the sidelines. He's throwing the deep ball better than anybody else right now in the country. What he is doing is better than anybody else, but of course, since he's not throwing the ball 50 times a game, he's not getting the 400 plus yard games, and so people aren't considering him for the Heisman as much. Now, I did say he has the 6th highest Heisman odds, so we're going to give him credit there, but there is no reason why. You look at the play, not just the numbers, but you look at the play, Cam Ward has not been better than Curtis Rourke.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's probably had a little bit more excitement because he's been in
right,
those
and that's the
games.
part of it, right? The exciting plays and we're scrambling. It's the same thing with Bryce Young. Bryce Young was not the best player that year when he won the Heisman, but of course he rolled out more than anybody else and threw on the run. So give him the award.
I think the issue too is like Miami. Well, I'll say this. Curtis Rourke has the opportunity to make bigger statements than Cam Ward ever will. Because I mean, you look at Miami's schedule. They play Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. That's the end of their schedule. So their best opponent will be number 25 Louisville at the end of the day. And they don't play Pitt. They don't play Clemson. They don't play SMU. Those are your other ranked teams in the ACC, except maybe in the ACC championship game. And like I'm sorry, SMU being your number 2 team in that conference just reeks of how bad your conference is.
Yep.
Like it's now, I will say it's interesting. Miami is 54th in strength of schedule, while Indiana is 81st. But that's not taking into account that they play number 40 Michigan, according to Sagarin, number 2 Ohio State, according to Sagarin, and then Purdue, which they're like in the hundreds because Purdue sucks. So Purdue yeah. So Purdue is 109th, by the way. They're ranked worse than Sam Houston State, UC Davis, Montana.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Fire Ryan Walters right now.
That's embarrassing.
The second worst team is Northwestern at 79. They're a full 30 spots higher.
Nope. Don't like that. Don't like that team's in the Big Ten. Get them out. Put them in the MAC. Fourth worst team in the MAC.
Wait, I'm very curious. For John Jacobs, I'm just gonna look this up for a minute. Where's Kent State? Kent State on this. Kent State. Oh, I have to be looking for a while. Wow.
What's the point spread on Kent State versus Purdue?
That's a really good question.
Neutral site.
Can we look that up on FanDuel?
Purdue -7? I don't know.
It might be a pick'em. Let's see. I'm not
Express
finding.
Guys are gonna hate it if they come in.
Yeah. Russ, I'm sorry. DK, I'm sorry.
At least they know it though. They're not arguing. They know it.
Let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah. So anyway, while you look that up, I wanted to do the Heisman things because I feel like Curtis Rourke is getting so much hate for not playing a tough enough schedule, and he missed that one game, so his numbers don't look as good, and he's not throwing the ball 50 times a game. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you got guys like Jackson Dart and Cam Ward in front of him. Dylan Gabriel, how is he not the leader for the Heisman in odds right now? The dude went to the defending national champions and tore them apart. He also had Ohio State at home and had the game-winning touchdown run. Like does it only matter numbers now? Like I thought at one point it was like what you did in the big games and stuff like that, but apparently that doesn't matter anymore. Dylan Gabriel should be far and away the Heisman favorite right now if we're considering that stuff. But of course, Cam Ward throws for a lot of yards because he throws 50 times a game, and people fall in love with that.
I feel like part of it too, and this would go down a rabbit trail that we don't have time for. There is a reality.
We barely have time for what we're doing right now.
Yeah, there's a reality that most players being talked about for the Heisman tend to play on a 4-letter network that no longer gets to air the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't trust the CFP committee either, because the CFP is owned by ESPN. So
really the only one in the top 5 that doesn't is Travis Hunter, but that's because he's Colorado. And
yeah, but like Colorado can still be on ESPN. Like they still have some rights.
Oh yeah, they can be. I know Fox plays plays the Colorado games more.
Yeah.
So
I want to apologize to Purdue for saying it'd be a pick'em. Kent State is 210th in the Sagarin ratings.
Oh my!
Punt them to Division III. Get them out of here.
Listen, my sister is going for a master's right now at Kent State. She's not watching football while she's doing that. I can tell you that much. And she actually kind of likes football. She grew up an Ohio State fan. She's not watching football. Yeah, that's for sure.
That's why Penn State let me into the Kent State game.
Oh my. Well, Zach, I think we put in an honest day's work nearly
Yeah.
2 hours here. Good stuff. Good Heisman conversation. I like that you had the kind of realistic approach. I took a little bit more of the underrated approach, and we got to bash the SEC a little bit in doing so. You got anything else you want to bring up before we get out of here?
Nope, this is fun. This is a great week. I will just so you all know, after this week, I will be on vacation. So if you're like, "Where's Zach?" I'm gonna be away for a little bit. So, but I'll be back.
It's not because he hates us, just because he needs a break. So
Celebrating my anniversary with my wife. So
there you go. That's an
yeah.
important thing to do. You'll be here Tuesday though, right?
Yep. Tomorrow on the Ohio State show. Tuesday. Yeah.
Yep. And we need more callers on the Ohio State show. So if you guys ever want to call in over there, we'll talk Ohio State. We'll talk Big Ten. We'll talk whatever you guys want to talk. So it'll be a good time. Come on over to the Ohio State channel on the Voice of College Football and call in. Talk, like I said, Ohio State, Big Ten. We'll talk it all. So it'll be a good time talking about it all over there. Zach, anything with Big Ten football talk you want to mention?
Thursday morning we'll have a show.
Sweet.
So
don't know what it is yet, but
don't know what it is yet. I'll probably figure that out tomorrow. So
there you go. Check us out Tuesday night as well. We'll be previewing the games. Awesome Indiana Michigan game. We'll get to preview also big game Ohio State Purdue. We got to make sure we preview that one as well. We'll hit them all, those games and many more. I think we'll also probably talk about hot seat coaches on Tuesday night. I think we'll finally have enough time to talk about that with only 7 games to preview. We might not hit 2 hours. We'll see. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate it. Have a good one.